Hello there, Jimmy doing his best Obi-Wan Kenobi impression. So I've been getting a lot of feedback lately from some people saying that I have been nitpicking shows like Vikings and The Last Kingdom to try and find all the things that are wrong with them, when I pointed out very clearly in my last video that I didn't need to nitpick to find things wrong with those shows. The nitpicking would come from trying to find what's right with them. So that's what we're going to be doing today for a sweet change. In order to try and find some of the things that these shows are doing right, I had to actually dig a little deeper into some of the costuming and some of the props and some of the choices that have been made in TV shows like Vikings and The Last Kingdom and even Norsemen, which is a parody. It's a send-up of Vikings, and it's very obviously a send-up of Vikings. I mean, this is clearly meant to be Lgertha in her biker boots and leather trousers. But I have found some things that are, if not right, then less awful. Let's start with Vikings. So Vikings is pretty obviously the worst of the bunch in a lot of ways, and I'm holding a laptop here that has some screen caps from the series and some production shots and some behind-the-scenes pictures. And we're going to start with this scene. And the obvious stuff is just incredible, but we're going to resist talking about it because they are actually using spears that were used in the period. These spears are either called winged spears, boar spears, hunting spears. These were used. The extent to which they were used in warfare, we don't know. They have some advantages. Those little wings can be pretty good for prizing shields away from people and that kind of thing, opening up guards in a shield wall. And they are a type of spear that was used, that was known in the early medieval period. And from the look of them, they have nice iron spearheads, or at least they're made to look like iron spearheads, and they're riveted, or at least they look like they're riveted. They may be glued on for all I know, but there's something slightly glistening on the back spear that looks like a rivet head. This is how spearheads were attached. They were attached to the wooden shaft of the spear with a rivet, usually made of iron, and that's how those weapons work. That's how those weapons work. Stop texting me. Threw my phone away. So yeah, congratulations. There's also a shirtless black leather-clad man, number 2, who is wearing a neck ring. Neck rings are known from the period. We've got quite a few neck rings, or torques if you prefer. Some of them are plain, some of them are less plain, most of them are made of silver, some of them are made of iron, some of them have other rings attached to them, some of those rings have things like Thor's hammers attached to them. So this is a kind of jewellery that was worn by Norse people in the period as well. There's 2 things that are right, just in this shot. Another of the things where you can find kind of right stuff is in the weapons used. And I'm not saying that the weapons in Vikings are good. Most of the weapons in Vikings are not good. They are far cheaper than most. I mean, all of the swords look worse than my swords. This shot here of Rollo has him holding an axe, and it's a broad axe, or a Dane axe if you prefer, and it's not as tall as him, and most of the pictures, in fact all of the pictures we have of broad axes from the period show axes not like twice the height of a man, but up to about armpit length. That's what he seems to be holding here. I mean, if he were scaling my wall, the motherfucker would last about 15 seconds before my 9-foot spear poked right the way through his face and his unarmoured torso. That's if the archers hadn't picked him off at 100 yards beforehand. But still, he's holding what looks like a relatively good depiction. But still, he's holding what looks like a relatively good depiction of an early medieval broadaxe. It's a little early for him to be holding one, but we'll let that slide because we're looking for the positives. This is what the actual axes look like. We've got lots of these things preserved. This is pretty similar to it. It has an approximate pretty good shape to the axe head. The haft fits it. It's not just, covered in leather wrapping as far as I can tell, at least in this shot. So it looks like a Viking Age weapon. Amazing. He's actually holding what looks like a Viking Age weapon. I'm almost impressed. Obviously, swords are kind of the impressive weapon in this show, and lots of people are shown holding swords, and in particular this sword. This sword, we're going to ignore the blade, because that's just not how fullers work, and if you're wondering what that means, that is the sort of the dip in the centre of the sword blade. That's called a fuller, and generally in early medieval swords, you'll see that go right the way up to the hilt, so the bit, that bit. What am I doing? So, As you can see in my sword here, the fuller goes right the way up to the hilt, all the way up to where the handguard is, the hilt, and we then have the handguard, wrist guard, quillen, whatever you want to call it. Everybody calls it a different thing. Who cares? You know what I'm talking about. We have the grip. Mine is made of leather with some nice brass and silver wire in it. And then we have the pommel and the pommel cap. These are very often in two parts in the Viking Age. The sword that we've got here, if we flip this around, has a lobed pommel. These are the lobes. It's got little lumpy bumpies on top of the pommel. It's got a grip, it's got a handguard, and it's got a blade. This looks, in outline, like a Viking Age sword, and in particular, it has the outline of this kind of Viking Age sword. Okay, from a distance, it looks good. It looks okay, it works. It works as a piece, works as a prop. Get this thing back in. This sword and variations of it appear throughout the series. Here it is again, looking quite similar. It's got a lovely jewelled, furniture on it, which is a bit silly looking, a bit fantasy looking, but the blade looks terrible. But the overall outline of it follows the overall outline of an early medieval Viking Age sword with a pommel cap. Sort of traditionally, this would be in two pieces. You'd have the cap, and then you'd have a little bar of metal, and it would be riveted through to hold that on, or the cap would be holding the base of the pommel on, and the tang, the actual end of the blade, like this. It works like this. It's easier to show you than to tell you, but this effectively is how those swords would be built. This is believably built like that from a distance. You know, if you don't look too closely at it. Cool beans. The general shape of these swords and axes looks good. Some of the other battle scenes, we've got lots of people carrying shields, which is amazing to see because so many series don't bother with shields, and every warrior on the battlefield, except those carrying two-handed weapons in some cases, would be carrying a shield. Here is a depiction of a man with a two-handed spear and a shield, for those doubters who say it never happened. Yes, it did. And this shield is doing a pretty good job of pretending that it is a wooden shield made of planks with a metal boss in the centre, which is what shields should be. So, leaving aside all of those masturbatory videos that we've all seen of people saying how amazing their shield is because it's a millimetre perfect recreation of a shield found in a ship, yippee, way hey, good for you, amazing, I'm proud of you, I'm sure your parents are clapping at you. The shields in the show effectively look like this shield. This is my reenactment shield, and it is a wooden shield with a linen cover and a leather rim and a metal boss. And on the back, it has a handle, a wooden handle, and a strap, so you can put it over your shoulder. And that's what this guy is holding, and that does the job really nicely. From the back, that shield looks really good. From the front, it's probably got the planks really visible, and it may have one of those silly kind of central rib things that you don't really see in the Viking Age, but you know what? It's a wooden shield with a leather rim. I'm very pleased. Could the rim be rawhide? Yeah. Could the rim have been metal? Possibly. Although the evidence seems to suggest that they were usually something organic, like leather or rawhide. I could believe that that is actually rawhide that's on that shield, so maximum points for that shield so far. Can't see the front of it, but looks good to me. I'd allow it on my living history encampment. Obviously some of the other arms and armour are... Some of the stuff in the costuming is okay. Season 1 has this actually relatively okay looking tunic. The texture of it is questionable, but generally, in terms of colour and basic shape, looks like a Viking Age tunic to me. We've also got shots like this where we see Lgertha wearing these tortoise brooches or domed brooches, and this is how they would be worn. They'd be worn in pairs at the shoulder. This isn't what they were used for, as far as we can tell. As far as we can tell, their job was to hold up the apron dress, and more about that in a moment. The big gold chain looks silly, but this is a Norse woman wearing tortoise brooches. Plus points. Fine. Maximum good. Well done. Well played. Well played. God love them, they tried their best. So, moving on to the Last Kingdom. The Last Kingdom I had to dig a little deeper. I had to actually do a little more nitpicking to find the positives. We have a woman wearing an apron dress, and this apron dress appears to work like a bib and brace. I can't actually tell exactly how it's fastened, but it seems to be like buckled to the straps, which is just not how they worked. I'm pretty sure that would be really uncomfortable. Like, I'm not sure that's how any woman wants her dress to work, but at least she's wearing something under the dress, which is a rarity in a lot of programs and films as well. Her apron dress has a nice braid at the top of it for decoration. She's wearing a belt, which is lovely, with a pouch hanging off it, which is also lovely, because a belt with a pouch hanging off it is an intensely practical thing to have on your apron dress, and it looks nice. Like, it's a weird brocade, but like the swords from a distance, it's an early medieval apron dress over a shift. So yeah, fair play. Obviously it would be more comfortable for her if the shift had a closer neckline so that those straps weren't just rubbing your clavicles the whole time, but can't have everything. Again, in the foreground, the sword here is a nice looking-ish sword. With a bit of a zoomy, it looks like it's trying to be a riveted sword with a composite material pommel. That would be something like metal sandwiching horn or antler or another type of metal, and they're all riveted together. So they're all sandwiched together and then rivet those layers together, and we've then got the actual pommel itself. Zoomed in, it's very obviously not real. You can see the casting line in it. That's not great. This sword is also a lot more of an early Saxon style of sword, and if we ignore all of the stupid pop rivets, black leather that's starting to lose its chrome tanning, and all the other stuff, and pretend for a moment that this is a sword made of metal with a riveted pommel and a nice organic, what looks like wooden grip instead of clearly a prop made of plastic. Again, the outline of this sword and the general style of sword that they've gone for is very attractive, very pretty, and when it's made by a real blacksmith in traditional, proper ways, is something that reenactors actually drool over. So I think that's a really good effort to do a cheap, cost-effective version of what in real life is a sword that could cost you £1,000 plus. These are still expensive weapons if you get them made by a master craftsman. So yeah, sure, why not? Even in this shot, the sword looks nice. And it actually looks nicer in this shot because you can't see the casting lines on the pommel and on the handguard, but you can see the rivets through the actual grip. You don't see those, you don't need those. The grip is a hollow cylinder that slides over the tang, so we don't really need that. But what we have also got is a nice little Thor's hammer. And this looks to be actually based on a find. Here's the find that it looks to be based on. So this guy is wearing a piece of jewellery that is appropriate for the period, and I'm proud of him for that. I'm proud of you, son. Shots like this are more difficult to find the positives in, but this guy here, stage right, is wearing what looks like just a tunic. Hooray. Plain tunic. T-shaped tunic. Easy to make, easy to cut. This guy might be wearing on as well, underneath his condom hat. But we also have a palisade in the background and an attempt at a thatched roof. That's not what thatched roofs look like at all. They're not that thick. They're like that thick. But an attempt was made. Fair play to them. They tried. God loves a trier, and they seem to have tried on this one. Palisades were a thing. Great stuff. Jewellery-wise, there is one highlight in The Last Kingdom, which is this brooch. And this brooch seems to be a very good attempt at the fuller brooch. And I don't know who made this. If anybody knows who made this brooch in the comments, if it's one of the recognised master jewelers of the reenactment world, I actually probably wouldn't be surprised. Everything else that people are wearing in this shot we can ignore, but this brooch, the fuller brooch, is a beautiful Anglo-Saxon brooch made of silver with depictions of the five senses on it, and it is just gorgeous. And if you look at this brooch, it looks very similar, so I suspect that this is actually a decent quality replica of that brooch. It's very big, it's a very expensive brooch, and it would have been back then. So it is the kind of thing you might expect a king to wear. So yeah, fair play. That is a nice piece of kit. The last show we're going to talk about is Norsemen. Norsemen is an absolute obvious parody, and some of the costuming is even worse than the costuming in Vikings on purpose. However, in this shot, we can see that we have lots of multicolored shields, which is great. We have shields with metal bosses in the center and organic rims, which is lovely. I'm pretty sure the guy in the foreground with the drum here is actually wearing turn shoes, which is just unheard of in Viking Age TV shows. And a lot of the scenes for the village in Norsemen were actually filmed at a living museum. I can't remember the name of the place now. One of the places is called Midgard Viking Center, which is in Norway, and Editing Jimmy will tell me where this is and put it on the screen. But they did an amazing job of actually finding good locations. So the main thing that they do right in Norsemen, aside from very adroitly picking up on all of the points in Vikings that they beautifully send up, it's a great show if you haven't seen it, highly recommend it, it's a travesty it's not getting a 4th season, is the sets, and places like the Long Hall and I think it's called the Chieftain's Hall in Midgard Viking Center. They use it to their advantage, and it's really, really good. The sets are really, really nice, the buildings are really well done. A lot of these places you can visit because they're obviously living museums, and I highly recommend that you go, if you ever visit Norway, to some of these places so that you can enjoy them. And of course, in this shot, we can see a couple of things that are actually very, very nice. So the sword scabbard here, and the sword again has this 5-lobed pommel, ostensibly a 2-part pommel again. This looks like one of those ones that would probably have a hollow pommel, like this one, found in Wales, found near where I'm from. Then the tang would be peened over on the top. The scabbard has silver. Silver is made of leather with silver fittings on it, and it's got the leather wrapped around it and then sewn in a central seam. And that's how those scabbards work. That's how they work. So it's a semi-decent sword. I'm pretty sure it's one of the cheap swords from one of the companies that we don't talk about, but it looks okay from a distance. The scabbard looks okay from a distance, and like, it's fine. Again, I would let somebody wear that at a reenactment I was in control of, if I were ever put in control of a reenactment, which would be a mistake. But there we go. All right. I did it. Are you happy now? I found positives in Vikings, The Last Kingdom, and Norsemen in the costuming, props, and sets. Okay, I did it. And it involved nitpicking. I don't need to nitpick to find the negatives, I need to nitpick to find the positives, and I enjoyed it. It was nice to do it, and it was enjoyable to do some positive stuff for these shows, because they do put a lot of work into them, they do put a lot of money and effort and time into them, and it's all very well for me to just tear them apart because it's an easy thing to do, but credit where credit is due. There are some nice pieces in these shows, and honestly, I enjoy watching them because I'm going to let you into a guilty secret now. People like me who do videos like this love bad historical drama. We love it. We love to watch it because we can tear it apart. Sometimes it's just nice to feel smug that you do your job better than a Hollywood props department. It's just nice. Everybody needs an ego boost now and then. Diolch yn fawr iawn unwaith eto am ymuno. Thank you very much once again for joining. I hope you enjoyed this video. I enjoyed making it, and thank you so much to all of my lovely new patrons. It's the end of the month as I'm filming this, so thank you notes are heading out. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much. Tan y tro nesa. Till the next time. Hwyl am y tro. Bye for now.